Hey everybody, how's it going? I just want to thank, first of all our 2,300 subscribers. We don't take each and every one of you for granted at all. We appreciate you traveling with us and engaging us. And I hope we put out enough sometimes quirky bits of information that are either fun to watch or offer you a launch pad to explore something further. There are already many good people out there that have shed light on the issue I'm about to speak about. However, I've only seen it in print form, and I am absolutely open to all discourse on what I'm about to say, and I believe I have a lot to learn from many of you who know more about this than I do. And if I'm off base, let me know. But I'm going to attempt to prove to you, not by hyperbole, but by definition, that the 3 questions I posed in the thumbnail of this video are indeed true. So the story starts with, I attempted to go fishing at Tonle Sap Lake, just outside of Siem Reap, when I went on a visa run to Cambodia, and I ended up unintentionally taking a tour of the floating villages there. When you rent a boat out of Tonle Sap, the boat captain that took me wasn't allowed to take me fishing, but only on a very specific route, and they can't deviate from that. So much so that the boat might as well be on tracks, like at the SeaWorld log ride or something like that. When I came back from this trip, one of the first things I did, after ruminating on my trek through the floating villages, was to peruse YouTube to see if I was the only person who thought that the tourism sector and government of Cambodia was trafficking and pimping the people of these villages and aiding in the degradation of the ecology there. I had to ask myself, what is it about us YouTubers that we will sacrifice what we think we see to what we want to see? We sometimes spend so much time staying on message because that's our preconceived belief of what the message should be, that we disregard any evidence to the contrary. There's a book by Malcolm Gladwell entitled Blink on this very subject. I think it's a good read, and you may get something out of it. Second, I am unambiguously in favor of tourism programs enhancing economies. Now, if I have my preference, tourism doesn't exploit anyone or thing and is done in a sustainable fashion, which is both good for the people of an area being toured and its ecology. And that right there is the rub with me. Siem Reap is the 2nd largest city in Cambodia with a population of 1 million and the common launch point to the famous Angkor Wat ancient city complex. And it's absolutely amazing. My wife and 7 family members visited some time ago, but because my wife wasn't able to travel with me this time, instead, my goal this time was to go fishing and try to catch some giant snakehead fish at Tonle Sap Reservoir. If you're a typical tourist, you're probably going to take one of the tour companies that pick you up at your hotel, and for give or take a range of $21 to $109 a piece, they'll take you to Tonle Sap with perhaps some stops along the way. When you get to the checkpoint, you'll then pay another $22 to have permission to be taken to the lake reserve for 2 hours, and the price also gets you a seat on a boat. Because I was focused on fishing, I got a tuk-tuk driver who spoke fairly good English to give me a ride out to the lake and do some of the brokering for me. Let me say this and then not discuss it anymore. The fishing trip was an absolute disaster. How many times I had to tell him and other people all I wanted to do was fish. He's gonna take me fishing. That's what I want. Can I get? I'm going fishing. I want a fishing boat. So tell her we want to go fishing first. A little side note about these tuk-tuk drivers and bootleg tour guides. They don't ever say no to anything. I was like, does she know how to fish? He was like, yeah. No. Do you know how to fish? I said, can you get me a fishing boat? Oh, yes, I can get you a fishing boat. I said, can you get me a fishing guide? Oh, yes, I know some of the best guides. But I bet you, if I would have said, can you find me an elephant in a tutu named Bonaparte? He would have said, I know an elephant named Bonaparte. So take what these drivers and these tour guides say to you with a grain of salt. So what does this all have to do with the belief that I have that the floating village touring program is a scam? That the villages are refugee camps that in some cases may support human trafficking and are pretty much nothing more than ghetto. Let's take a look at the tours and where the money goes. We'll all pay the $20 to be taken to the lake, and we'll all pay the $22 entrance fee to the park, and we'll all get on a boat. So of the $42 a piece, and in some cases over $100 a piece that each tourist pays to take a boat ride, absolutely zero goes to the villages. I could not find a trail that connected that money directly to the villages. The government gets their 22, and the tour companies get their 20 or more per person. Now, let's do some back of the envelope math. I think it's fair to say that 10% of the 2 million people that visit Angkor Wat probably take a ride out to the floating villages. So it's safe to say 200,000 people a year visit the floating villages at a minimum of $42 a piece. So that already accounts for almost $8.5 million. That's before anyone buys a single keepsake, buys food, or gives additional tips to anyone. And keep in mind that the tourist booths that people buy things from before they enter the reserve all goes to Cambodian citizens not associated with the floating villages. So using this math, I'm confident that there's easily $10 million being generated in the Cambodian economy for Cambodians because of the floating villages. And so why, with less than 15,000 households in the floating villages, are families only making $500 a year? And some people think that shit is quaint. Very little tourism dollars enter and stay in the villages. So who are the people of the floating villages? Well, one thing for sure, you'll find very little about them on the official Cambodian tourism site. According to Sue Slate, who wrote a vlog on them some time ago, there are some accounts of more than 170 floating villages with about 80,000 inhabitants, and that would come to more or less 15,000 households. Yes, this lake can be mistaken for an ocean, and that all of these people can easily fit on this lake is a testament to its size. The majority of inhabitants are considered, now get this, non-immigrant foreigners, made up of 3 ethnic groups: Vietnamese, Khmer, and Cham. And they are basically people without a country. Non-immigrant foreigners, an official label given to these people by the Cambodian government that is circular reason to keep them disenfranchised. They endured the brutality of the Khmer Rouge regime and genocide. And the Vietnamese living in Cambodia faced execution or deportation of Vietnam during that time. Now, while all 3 ethnicities suffer severe racism at the hands of Cambodians, anyone with Vietnamese ancestry are treated so much worse, and they make up the majority of floating village inhabitants. They have been stripped of all Cambodian identity, property, and papers. Those who returned to Cambodia in the 80s after fleeing the genocide could neither reclaim or buy land. Their solution then, and generations later, is to live in a wooden home floating on bamboo rafts and barrels. Now, as soon as we rode past these shacks, the first thing that went through my mind is that this is a ghetto. And my friend told me after I told him this, he said to me, well, that's because you've lived in a few hoods and you can easily recognize a hood when you see one. And I'd have to say that's a superpower that I have. So these people live on this lake because they have no land rights or citizenship in Cambodia. You see, floating villages and stilted houses on muddy banks are illegal in Cambodia. That is, until it seems they start making money for the government and local economies. You see, many of these people have been evicted from where they once were on the lake, and they have been forcibly moved to other places on the lake. They were evicted in part because of the rapid nativism that exists among Cambodians today. To say they hate anyone with Vietnamese lineage is not an understatement. So these people are caught in an unending cycle of poverty. The thousands living on Tonle Sap Lake are unable to overcome their status of being a people without a country because children born to those who survive on Tonle Sap are not issued birth certificates. Those who call their floating villages home cannot attend public schools, cannot own property, get a factory job, attain a driver's license, or open a bank account. Furthermore, they live in a continual debt cycle with bootleg lenders and microloan companies. As written on the website Geographical by Tommy Trenchard as recently as 17 October 2023, here's an example of a family that Mr. Trenchard interviewed. a family, in order to purchase fishing equipment and make repairs to their home, the family borrowed 6 million reals, the denomination of the country. That comes to about $1,500. But because they were unable to generate enough income from their fishing, all they can do is cover the interest every month. Remember, they only make $500 a year. So far, this family, at the point of 2018, had paid nearly 7 million reals, or over $1,725 in interest. But they still owed the original 6 million, or $1,500. Out of the 24 families interviewed by Geographical, every single one said they were in debt to banks, microfinance institutions, or individual lenders. While a dwindling number of people continue to eke out a life fishing in Cambodia's once bountiful Tonle Sap Lake, many more have been forced to leave for the sweatshops of nearby Phnom Penh. I'm not even going to go into any depth about how climate change and droughts, the building of dams all along the Mekong Basin, pollution, and illegal fishing, which in some cases is performed at industrial levels by corrupt government officials, has diminished the fishing in this once bountiful lake. Because fishing can no longer support families, some parents send their children to the mainland to work as young as age 15. Many are leaving the lake altogether, moving to urban areas. And all this while they are undocumented, non-immigrant foreigners. Furthermore, it's been reported that the Tonle Sap is one of the world's biggest inland fisheries, producing over 400,000 tons of fish and feeding over 3 million people. But the math doesn't math right. If so, why are these fishermen and their families living at below a subsistence level? Is it because of governmental, economic, or cultural bias? Or is it all three? But I understand as a tourist, we're yearning to get a glimpse of a simpler life where people have no worries, where they work in the lazy sun and the children dive off of floating porches, where they row themselves to school to get a good education. And we marvel, as Ben Mark wrote in the New York Times Magazine, at the space between houses, where some families raise carp and catfish in bamboo cages, or keep floating gardens of potted peppers and papaya trees. But Mr. Ben Mark saw it for what it really was. So it seems like almost everyone on the internet thinks that touring these ghettos is quaint. But by definition, these villages are ghettos. Put yourself in their position. Would you want to voluntarily live without easily potable water, swim, cook, wash your dishes and clothes, and sometimes drink from the same water you crap in and pour industrial and household waste into? Would you want to live in a house that is either built on stilts, or if they float precariously on steel drums or cement pots that could capsize if the tour boats come too close too fast? Would you want to toil as a subsistence fisherman on a sea of water that claims lives and injures people every year, even so that it feels an orphanage on the lake? And I'm not qualified to talk on the 2 orphanages that are in these villages, but what do you think happens to an undocumented child of undocumented dead parents when they age out of the orphanage at the ripe old age of, say, 14 or 15, in a country that is known for buying virgins and has a big child sex trafficking problem? Do these villages who produce children without documentation on a dying lake with not enough food not seem like an incubator for child trafficking to you? Would you want to have to dodge pythons and other poisonous water snakes daily without an education where your life expectancy is only 54 years and the highest cause of death of children is diarrhea? Trust me, this shit ain't quaint. So in effect, when you get on that boat and you are photographing or simply looking at these pleasant people, you are in essence touring, by definition, a generational, non-immigrant, foreigner, refugee displacement camp. Because again, these villages are not permanent. The government has been known to raid these houses and confiscate papers of the villagers that declare they are Cambodian, because the Cambodian society has determined that your citizenship is based on your ethnicity and not on your birth or your assimilation or the fact that you once owned land in Cambodia. Of the 2 villages you may well visit, you'll probably visit Chong Nes, which was purchased by a private firm to develop into a profitable touring village. What's ironic is the people in Tonle will probably be better off because the owners are going to want the non-immigrant foreigners to stay put and put on a show of daily life, which means they're going to get fed better by the firm and probably free health care and decent enough clothes to wear without spoiling any sense of colloquialism. These villagers are not employees. They're just there for show and to be profited off of. Isn't this all, by definition, human trafficking? So what's the fix? Well, I hope some of you out there who are much smarter than myself can suggest some fixes. But here are some grassroots things that I think might help. 1. Make a point before booking with your tour agency by asking them how do they donate or put money into programs that assist the people of the floating villages of Tonle Sap. 2. Make a point of spending money by putting your tourist dollars directly into the hands of the villagers. Think about taking items to the village to hand out to the medical clinic there, to the church, or to the people themselves. Now this is a tricky one because we don't want to create a climate of dependence. But trust me, when a family only makes $40 a month, we've got plenty of wiggle room before we reach the threshold of dependence. Now, what if 200,000 visitors a year arbitrarily put $5 directly into the hands of a villager? Whether it be a guy working on an engine, a lady selling vegetables, or an old person just walking down the street. Think about it. $1 million arbitrarily infused into their closed economy from your hand to theirs. Because if you'll notice, everyone in the villages is working. There are no beggars. Now, not all is doom and gloom. There are currently 15 community-based organizations working across 4 provinces that touch on the lake. Almost all of them are funded by the European Union and led in part by the Wildlife Conservation Society and Oxfam. One could argue a belief that, well, I don't personally agree with that at the macro level. We are not going to change deep-rooted governmental and societal outlooks, and you know what? I understand that opinion. But at the grassroots level, I believe money talks, and where, how, and why we spend our money will modify behaviors and change the focus of local economies. So, there it is, folks, in a nutshell. Now, I'm not in any way saying, and I want to emphasize this, I'm not saying don't go to Tonle Sap and the floating villages. In fact, by all means, I'm encouraging you to go to Tonle Sap and the floating villages. But just know what you're taking a look at when you do go. And perhaps it might, hopefully, in some way, help you to be more discerning in where you spend your money and what you spend your money for. And us as tourists, us as people from around the world who love to travel, we have an amazing, unfocused power. We go places in the millions and spend indiscriminate dollars. And I think that's great because that's people's money. They should spend it the way they want to spend it. But when you do go there, taking your money and put it directly in the hands of a village person, I think goes a long, long way. That's really all I'm saying, if you should choose to do so. If you've made it this far in the video, I just want to say I appreciate you. Thanks for watching and have a great day, okay?